Oh, there we are live. Okay, the divided mind, page 42. But she also had physical symptoms. Some were clearly hysterical in type, others were typical of what we see in patients with TMS, what was then called muscular rheumatism, a psychosomatic manifestation. So she had three of the psychogenic categories described earlier. Fraulein Elizabeth von R. was 24 when Freud first saw her. She had symptoms that were almost exclusively of the muscular rheumatism type and had a history typical of the cases I work with today. Here is what Freud said about muscular rheumatism. It seems probable that in the first instant these pains were rheumatic, that is to say, to give a definite sense to that much misused term. They were a kind which resides principally in the muscles, involves a marked sensitiveness to pressure and modification of consistency in the muscles, is as its most severe after a considerable period of rest and immobilization of the extremity. An example, in the morning, is improved by practicing the painful movement and can be dissipated by massage. These myogenic pains, which are universally common, acquire great importance in neuropaths. They themselves regard them as nervous and are encouraged by their physicians who are not in the habit of examining muscles by digital pressure. Such pains provide the material of countless neuralgias and so-called sciaticas, etc., etc. This is a brief but remarkable description of one of the many pain patterns of people with TMS, of whom my colleagues and I have seen literally thousands. Freud was a peerless observer. It is interesting that though he attributed all of the symptoms to muscle, he mentions neuralgias and sciaticas in his descriptions, both of which are nerve manifestations of TMS. Those who have read my books describing TMS will recognize his description. The pity is that he did not recognize that the psyche initiated the process. In this case, he would have done well to heed the patient's family doctors who said the symptoms were nervous. He was fooled by the truly physical nature of the symptoms, the pain on the digital pressure, which is one of the hallmarks of TMS. Freud's view at the time was that the process was organic, that is, originating in the body, not the mind. That's a good line right there. Freud's view at the time was that the process was organic, that is, originating in the body, not the mind, because of the physical findings on examinations. His view was entirely justified by the neuroscience of the time. He further believed that the psyche simply used the symptoms for a neurotic purpose. I think he would have discovered the truth had he committed to study physical manifestations, but he turned his attention to the neurosis and had very little to say about physical symptoms as his career developed. The principle of emotional and physical equivalency plays out differently today than it did in Freud's time. Cases like Frau Emmy von N are unusual now because hysterical signs or symptoms are rare, though I encountered one recently. The patient was a young woman in her 20s who described feeling as though her leg was sinking into the ground when she walked. One of the characteristics of a hysterical symptom is its bizarre, unreal quality demonstrated classically in this young woman. Generally, people who tend to have either a physical or an affective symptom, either TMS or one of its equivalents, or emotional manifestations like anxiety, depression, phobias, or obsessions. The medical profession reorganizes. No, I'm sorry, it's not reorganizes. The medical profession recognizes the latter but not the former as psychological. The prevailing pattern depends on what is in vogue. Tow truck.
Yeah, what is a tow truck?
I love reading to this guy. He gets to hear clear and precise English. Okay. Back to page 43, what is psychosomatic medicine? Generally, people now tend to have either a physical or an affirmative symptom, either TMS or one of its equivalents, or emotional manifestations like anxiety, depression, phobias, or obsessions. The medical profession recognizes the latter but not the former as psychological. The prevailing pattern depends on what is in vogue. Hysterical signs and symptoms are out of fashion. TMS is in, with all its variations like low back pain, sciatica, neck and shoulder pain, fibromyalgia, carpal tunnel syndrome, knee pain, hip pain, and on and on. Gastrointestinal symptoms are also in vogue. Less commonly, a patient may have emotional and physical symptoms concurrently. I had such a patient recently. Okay, we're going to read one more page and then we're going to stop at chapter 2. Chapter 2 is a brief history of psychosomatic medicine. Page 44. Young man came with a history of quite severe back pain of 2 years duration. He did well in the program and became pain-free in about 3 weeks. Shortly thereafter, he began to feel anxious and began to have some of his old stomach trouble again. This was the symptom imperative at work. The occurrence of two simultaneously psychogenic manifestations clearly suggested the need for psychotherapy. Either the severity of a symptom, emotional or physical, or the existence of two or more at the same time is an indication of the power of the unconscious conflict within. To extend this further, more serious physical disorders like the autoimmune cardiovascular or neoplastic disorder suggest more deeply repressed phenomena. In our view, all of Frau Emmy's and Fraulein Elizabeth's symptoms, affective or physical, hysterical, or psychosomatic, served the same purpose, that is, as a defense against powerful emotions in the unconscious that were striving to come to consciousness or were being repressed because of their emotionally painful nature. So this book is really addressing how the mind can affect the body and create physical symptoms. All right. Hero, it's time to go to sleep.
Go sleep.
All right, if you haven't done so already, subscribe.